This segment of the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast is sponsored in part by Dark Horse Tackle. Go to darkhorsetackle.com and use promo code BKB5 to save an extra $5 when you build your own box. Douglas Outdoors. Serious rods for serious anglers. Norsk Lithium. The lithium kayak battery you need is just a click away. Go to norsklithium.com. Catch Outdoors, the official measuring board for all 3 national trails. Go to catchoutdoors.com and use promo code BKB5 to save 5% on your next online purchase. What is going on, everyone? Welcome once again to the Real Life in the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. As always, it's your boy Armando. Excited about this episode today. I got one of my favorite people in the kayak bass fishing, outdoor fishing community, Jensen. I feel like every time I catch bass, I kind of like owe it to him in the sense that when I moved from Puerto Rico to Texas, I really enjoyed fishing, but I've never fished for bass. And I didn't even know YouTube was. I kind of knew YouTube was a thing, and I always thought it was just to like watch funny videos, downtime at work. I didn't know there were like instructional videos and teaching videos and all that. And then somebody told me like, hey, if you want to learn more about bass fishing, you should definitely go to YouTube and look up bass fishing, kayak bass fishing and stuff like that. And then I found out, oh, okay, cool. There's a lot of stuff that actually YouTube's not just to find funny videos. It's actually a lot of good, educational stuff for anything and everything. So I stumbled onto Jensen, the Flukemaster, and man, I learned so much. All the foundation of what I learned in bass fishing, I think I've owed mostly, if not all of it, to Jensen, including what I did in Caddo Lake, which was, I feel like, the best tournament I've ever had at the national scale. It was punching through grass, like I mentioned in my previous podcast, and I learned that from watching Jensen, the Flukemaster's videos a long time ago. So it's pretty cool to have him on the podcast. This is the second time he's been on the podcast, but I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about his big win at Caddo Lake for the Bassmaster. Actually, Caddo and Bistineau Lake. So he fished one of those 2. I'm going to find out which one when we get him here on the podcast. But basically the 5th stop on the Bassmaster Kayak Series. It was in Shreveport, and it included Lake Bistineau and Lake Caddo. Jensen won it with an awesome total, 2-day total. And I was excited about it. I was driving home and I was like, oh, let me check, if they release who won. And when I saw who won, I immediately texted him and I was like super excited. I was just excited to be on the same tournament as he was, because like, oh, this is my first time I get to fish on a tournament with kind of like my virtual mentor, Gene. And I was like, it would be like a cool measuring stick. Like, how far have I grown over the last 5 years since I started following his account into what I've been able to accomplish now. So it's pretty cool. And I was super excited. I root for a lot of people when it comes to tournaments, and I want each and every one to do great. But watching Gene win it is pretty special, pretty awesome in my book. So anyways, before we get started, I have a couple of day 1 and day 2 Caddo videos that I try to make time to edit it, upload it. Not that I did as good as this guy's catch check and won the tournament, but I feel like there's some stuff that for newer anglers that they can learn, especially with the mental struggles of like nothing working out, for the first 4 hours in day 1, and then kind of like going through the motions of trying to figure out, and then kind of eventually figuring out in day 2, committing to what I found later on in day 1. I think it's might serve for some of you to kind of learn from a novice or an amateur of the struggles of a kayak fishing tournament. I just haven't got time with it. It's been so busy with work, which is good because I really need the money. I'm going on vacation, anniversary trip in a couple of weeks. I did get Monday off, but I went actually bow hunting with one of my good friends, Danny, who's been doing it for 12 years. He was showing me the ropes, kind of teaching me how to bow hunt. It's the first time I've ever done any type of hunting, if you don't include fishing. And I was this is a quick story. I got into this, I guess it's called steel and stock hunting, which is like we're looking for spots and then we kind of each one finds its own spot, hunker down in some brush or whatever cover, natural cover that you have, kind of like a natural blind, and hopefully anticipate where you think the uh the deer are gonna come up. So he kind of teach me the ropes of how to like look for a place, but then told me pick your place, see which one you think is gonna work out. And I found a spot. I thought it was great. I had a clearing for about 25 degrees in front of me and on the back of me. The wind was on my face, so I figured there's no bug that's going to come behind me, because what I've learned is that, once they smell you, they pick up your scent. That's the word, proper terms, pick up your scent. They'll probably run away. So I was looking straight in front, and actually, kind of like bass, you think they're going to do something and then they do something different. This big buck came on my left side, which was all brush. Like I could hardly see it, but I can tell it was a big buck. And he was coming up, and he was about 10 feet away of hitting this clearing in front of me. And I was gonna have like a no miss 5-yard shot at it. So I was super excited. My heart was racing. So I turned around with my bow. As I draw my bow, I had it pointing at down, and I didn't notice my arrow got snagged in a bunch of like spiny vines. So when I drawed it, it made this ruffling noise, and he stopped. And he was looking through the brush, trying to find out what the noise was. And all of a sudden, he's frantically looking. I couldn't, and I just stood still. Eventually, he kind of made a U-turn and went straight, and I didn't have a clear shot. And I was wondering what happened. And I look at the knock on my arrow, and when I was, when you draw and then when you not release, but when I was undrawing my bow, I guess that's the word. I accidentally knock the arrow harder, so the light on the knock started blinking. I can't see it because I'm trying to stay still, and apparently that's what the bug started noticing, all this light flickering through the brush, and that's when it took off. So I was kind of disappointed at that, but excited. Being this close to nature, like a buck 5 yards away from you, it's really an unreal feeling. So I was super excited about that. But anyways, enough of me. Let's bring in Flukemaster Jensen. Buddy, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm doing good. As I having fun hearing your hunting stories. That was my original passion growing up, was going to the woods with my dad. So
that's why. Is your dad still with us?
No, Dad passed away. He had Parkinson's. He passed away 4 years ago, I believe, 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. I've got, matter of fact, I'll share with you. I've got his antelope on the wall right here.
Oh, yeah?
See if I can do it without messing it up. That's his antelope.
That's awesome.
And then that's a deer I killed on his property 10 years ago, I think.
That is a big buck.
Yeah. Yeah. So
where did he get that antelope? Was he in Texas? I know there are a lot of
Texas, he actually, it was a trip that he took my little brother on for graduating high school. So he took me to caribou hunting in northern Canada.
Nice.
And then he took my brother to Wyoming antelope hunting. So
nice.
Yep.
I found my passion with it, and I absolutely love it. I can't wait to go back. I'll probably go back next.
Oh, it's fun. I shot most of my big bucks. I've shot sitting on the ground just like that. So that's my favorite way to hunt. Can't do it as much anymore because we got people that use feeders all the time, and it sucks deer off of property. So you have to use feeders. You don't see a whole lot of deer, but I still enjoy doing it. So
yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't get out there that much. So.
Well, anyways, let's talk about your big win, buddy. It is, again, I was super excited. I knew day one you were in the top 5. You had something like a 98 and a quarter, and you were doing pretty good.
Yeah, I was in 10th. I was in 10th after day one. Yep.
So you made that leap to first place. I was driving. I scrolled to see if they announced the winners, and I was super excited. Like I was like, "Oh man, this is awesome! For you won this." So first of all, how does it feel, man?
And pretty, I don't know. It's foreign to me because I didn't realize how big the tournament was. If that makes sense, I went in for fun. You know, if I'm not having fun fishing tournaments, I don't fish them. And so this was one of those where it was one of my favorite lakes in the country. Bistineau and Caddo are both some of my favorite lakes. And I was like, you know what? I've got the time on the schedule. I just, I want to go fish it. And I don't fish tournaments unless I'm serious about at least trying to finish in the top 10, top 15, whatever else, but trying to do the best I can do. So I went before cutoff. I went to Caddo for a week, end of August, early September, first day or two of September. So mostly early or late August, and fished Caddo and got a bunch of waypoints and everything else, and totally decided I was going to fish Caddo. Got an Airbnb up there, and then about 5 days after I got the Airbnb, I called my travel partner Michael, and I was like, I might have screwed up. He's like, what? I goes, Bistineau's on the list to be fished too, and I just never clicked in my head that was that should be an option of mine because I was so focused on Caddo, and I was like, I might have gotten the wrong Airbnb. We were 80 miles from Bistineau. And so I told him, I said, he had a KBF event to finish up the first 2 days of official practice. And so I told him I would go there and fish Bistineau for the first 2 days and see what I thought. And those 2 days changed my mind and made it to where I had to drive 80 miles every day. So
you've actually fished Bistineau for the tournament?
Yep. I fished Bistineau every day of practice but one, and then both days of the tournament. Yeah.
I figured the winner was going to come from Bistineau. I think you mentioned like the drawdown for the duck hunters. I think that they do it at this time of the year. So it kind of like makes it simpler, to find the fish, I guess, versus when the lake is full pool and they're kind of more spread out. I've never fished Bistineau, just going by what some of the people that have fished it before. I remember I probably say this on the podcast on a weekly basis, but again, the KBF National Championship with the Guillermo and Cody just going neck to neck, putting up 100 inches each one on Lake Bistineau. Isn't that this image just popped into my head? The video that you released, I think you were either Caddo or Bistineau, and you were standing on your bona fide and you hit a stump when you're trolling morning, you fell overboard. I actually reshared that on my Facebook account saying like, I'm losing my heroes here. Was that Caddo or Bistineau?
That was actually on Caddo, way up in Clinton Lake. I was fun fishing. I was just, I wasn't fishing a tournament or anything. I was just up fun fishing, and I was by myself. So thank the good Lord that I know how to get back into a kayak.
Yeah.
If I fall out, because literally, if you know where Clinton Lake is, it's actually part of Caddo, but they call it Clinton Lake. It is the furthest away from a boat ramp you can get.
Yep.
And it is you don't hardly during the week you don't see anybody, and so I'd have been hurting pretty bad had I not known how to get back in my own boat.
Yeah. And then you've actually made some videos on YouTube of how to get
into the boat. And I do a safety seminar at what is it, the Indianapolis sports boat and RV show every year. I do a safety seminar there, which includes that video and where I talk about that. And I do other seminars too, but that's one of the ones I do while I'm there.
I remember following your account. Actually, the first time I think a video came up when I was, like I mentioned, like looking, it was Bass HQ or Bass Fishing HQ. Didn't you host one of that channel, something like that, right?
I don't remember. I know I've been on their show a couple of times.
Yeah, I know you had a bunch of videos. Then they had another older gentleman that came after, which he did pretty good as well. And then I kind of found the Flukemaster channel, that's when you kind of transition more to kayak bass fishing, I'm assuming. But anyways, let's talk about Bistineau. What, again, like I told the audience, I try to do my best to ask questions of what the audience wants to know. By the way, Shout out to Martin Bonugli. I'm sure I mispronounced that. He says, I want to get some questions before I have to go. I'll come back and listen. Yes, you can, Martin, you can listen on our podcast streaming platform. You can find it, Bass Kayak and Beers, on any podcast streaming platform. You can come back to Facebook, you can come back to YouTube. So if anybody has a question, please put it in the comments. But basically, I'll ask the questions. You can be as
yes. Well, to answer his question, I do live stream. I do a TikTok live while I'm in fishing tournaments. Usually, if it's 2-day, I do it on the second day. That way, I don't get guests on the second day because they know where I'm fishing now. It kind of keep the first day secret. And then when I'm fun fishing around Gunnersville and stuff like that, I'll live on YouTube and on TikTok. So.
By the way, before I ask you, do you still? I've been meaning to do this, and of course, I know you charge for this service. I'm not asking for a freebie, although I would take it. But you do guided. You still do the guided service?
Yeah, I still got on Gunnersville. I'm done for the year just because of family stuff, and then it gets just too cold to It's I don't want to have to worry about that, and so I get to do that, and I'll start back up in the spring when it gets a little bit warmer. So I don't do it a lot. I do maybe 4 or 5 trips a month, but I do it just enough to keep it fun.
That's cool. All right, so you decided on Bistineau.
Yep.
Kind of what was working for you on pre-fishing, and they did transition to actual tournament day.
So Bistineau was in the middle of their annual drawdown where they dropped the water as much as 9 feet. And it was almost at 9 feet when the tournament started. But the first day of practice, it was up 5 or 6 inches than what it was when the tournament started. So I was looking for specific areas. When in a drawdown, it forces those fish who love to be shallow to move out of that shallow water and get into deeper water for safety and security.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was looking for those areas that were connected to super shallow water, but were a little bit deeper. So I was looking for drains, which is basically what it is. Where does that water drain to? And I remember when I first put in the lake, I went up, took a left, I went up into some shallow stuff, and then it got so shallow I had to pull up my rudder and I had to start paddling. And that PWR drafts really, really shallow, but it was on the bottom. So I was only in about 4.5 inches of water. And so I got through all of that and then got to a little bit deeper area. And then I looked off in the distance and there was a John boat out there fishing. And I'm like, well, it must be deeper over there. So I kind of snuck over and slid over next to him. And I watched him for about 30 minutes to an hour, and he was catching fish. And I was like, oh, okay. So there's a school of fish there. And I made mental note and, of course, marked a waypoint from right where I was at, and came back a little bit later and just kind of scanned the area and started looking to see what kind of stuff he was fishing to hold that fish, and found the head of this drain. And then I went back the next day to that same spot, and those fish were gone. And I'm like, what is going on? So that kind of helped me put 2 and 2 together. They were there one day, gone the next day. I looked at the lake levels. They had dropped 1/2 inch, and those fish had moved out a little bit deeper. And then the next day of practice, I checked them again, and they'd moved out a little bit deeper, and the water was continuing to drop about 1/2 inch a day. And so I just followed these fish out until I found this deeper drain, and I was like, this is a special place. I started catching fish there, and I started going out to the river channel and running the river channel, kind of doing the same pattern that Guillermo was doing in that tournament 2 years ago, where I was hitting those flats off the side of the river channel and hitting major trees in that area. And I was catching decent fish, just wasn't catching the quality that I was catching up in the drain. And so then I had 2 different things I could go off of, and that's kind of where my game plan came from. So
was it any bait that specifically worked more than another? Did you find a bait like that? That it was like a pattern or tip type of bait specifically that was working?
When the water the clarity was about 6 inches at most. I mean, but if the current stopped, if they stopped pulling water after about 2 hours or so, that water would clear up a little bit more, but still it was really dingy, dirty water. And so I went And from watching those videos from 2 years ago, you know, watching what Guillermo was throwing, he's throwing a white bladed spinnerbait. He's actually throwing a War Eagle spinnerbait. I had some in the box, but I found one that worked even better than that, which was, at least for me, which was a Nichols spinnerbait that had white blades. It was just all white spinnerbait with white blades, and it was a 1/2 ounce. And it's just one of those things. This time of the year, it really helps you cover water in that wood. I would love to have thrown a chatterbait, but the chatterbait kept getting hung when I got super close to those cypress trees. And so I stayed with the spinnerbait, and I just kept catching good quality fish, and anywhere from 17 to 20 inches on practice days. And I didn't catch any giant limits on practice days. I think my biggest limit was 93 inches, but I didn't stay put. I didn't stay in one area. I was covering 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 miles a day. So I didn't really, I knew it was a good area. And then I went to Caddo one day to check some of my old waypoints and came back with like 71 inches. And I'm like, nope, I'm not even going to worry about Caddo. It's not even going to cross my mind again. And I stayed on Bistineau the rest of the tournament.
After day one, were you like tempted to go back to Caddo, or were you like, for better or worse, you're gonna stick to Bistineau?
Yeah,
right?
Because day one I didn't beat up my fish. So day one there was also a club tournament that went on, and they actually launched, which is really rare because we usually launch really early in the morning on tournament, you know, for kayak tournaments. They launched a 1/2 hour before us, so they were already at those spots on Bistineau. So, and it was a lot of boats, a lot more than I expected. So when I went, first place I stopped on day one was the edge of the river channel, mainly because I had a cameraman or a camera woman that was going to meet me out on the lake. I told her, I said, don't put in when all the other competitors are put it in. Wait till we already are out on the water and then put it in coming. You might know her. Emily Hyman is her name. She fishes KBF stuff. So she was going to follow me, and I didn't, you know, and so I went to an area where I knew she'd be able to find me. And I also knew there were some fish because I'd caught them the last day of practice there. So I got there, and the guy that ended up finishing second, gosh, my mind just went blank. Scotch. Do what?
Oh, Matthew Scotch.
Matthew Scotch was there too. He started there too, and I'm like, we were literally 30 feet from each other when the tournament started. I didn't really want that to be my starting spot, but because I had to wait for Emily, and I had time, I knew that the buzzbait bite that I wanted wasn't going to pan out, so it really didn't bother me. So I had this 8-foot by 10-foot set spot that I knew these fish were sitting on, and I was hoping that Matthew would come out of, you know, because he cut through the trees and I went around. I was hoping he'd come out and then turn right and go away from me, which is exactly what he did. He came out about 10 feet beyond that spot that I wanted to fish and turned right and went the other way. And I let him get good, you know, get a little ways away. And then I went directly to that spot and made 5 casts, and that bass hit 4 times before on the 5th cast it finally got the spinnerbait. So he was having a hard time getting it in his mouth for some reason, but it was a 19-inch fish. Put it on the board. And then Emily showed up, and we got everything situated for her to follow me. And then I went towards my main area, and then caught a 20-incher on the way. I hadn't even gotten there yet. I caught a 20.5 or 20 1/4 incher on a little hump that was on the way, and then pulled up in there. And then there were 4 boats back in that area, and I'm like, crap. And because there were so many fish concentrated in that area, I knew that they were going to be spooky, just because that's what they did when I would barge through the middle of that school or that area with my kayak. They would spook out, and there was just a lot of fish there. And so I found this little hole that had the boats hadn't touched, that hadn't been disturbed, and there were fish there in that area. And I caught 5 fish in 5 casts on this one spot. Wow. And then 1 cast without a fish, and then caught a 6th fish. And I think I ended up catching 8. Hold on a second. Let me,
yeah, go ahead. Do what you need to.
I had to shut my phone down. But anyway, then I ended up catching 8 in that area, and I left, and I came back through there one more time during the day, but I did not beat that area up, thinking I'm going to save it for day 2. I had a good 98.5 or 98 1/4 inch limit. I'm going to save it for day 2. and go and because I knew there weren't going to be hardly any boats on the lake on Sunday. So I did. And that's kind of how that worked out. So.
And then Sunday, how confident were you that, you can try to pull this off on Sunday? What was your confidence level at?
My goal was top 5.
Yeah.
I with the 102-inch limits that were in day one, and I knew those had been caught on Caddo. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able. I mean, that many people ahead of me were going to have a worse day.
Yeah.
And the likelihood was slim to none. So didn't even cross my mind. It was just like, I need to grind so I can get a top 5 finish, so I can qualify for the championship on Lake Fork in March and be good. And so I was like, so about halfway through the day, I had 98, I think, and 98 and a half or 98 and a quarter. And I looked at the leaderboard, and I'm tied with Jody Queen, who's in second, and I was in third because he had a bigger fish than me. And he was one of the guys that did pretty good, or was on a good school of fish over on Caddo. He's also a really dear friend of mine. And so I was just like, oh, I've got to catch one upgrade. I think I had a 17 in something that I needed to upgrade 1/4 of an inch just to bump in front of him. And I said it out loud. I was like, I cannot let him beat me on a tie. I was like, I've got to upgrade. So I started to kind of just work the area more and more and more and get further out and try to upgrade. And that didn't work. And I came back in with an hour left, and I did end up catching one upgrade, bumping that spinnerbait on a tree. Matter of fact, I think that's the one that I broke the spinnerbait on, because part of the way through that day, that spinnerbait that I'd caught, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 fish that whole week on, finally broke, which they do, and that's part of spinnerbait fishing. But it broke when I was bringing the fish into the net, and I slid the net underneath them, and that bait popped, and the fish fell in the net. And I think that is the one that bumped me ahead of Jody. But by that time, they had cut the leaderboard off, so we couldn't see who was winning and what was going on. And so I had about a half hour left, and still kind of spinning out in my head, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I found myself sitting there with spot lock on, with my active target in the water, staring at one fish that was on a stump, trying to get it to bite. And I thought to myself, I was like, what in the world are you doing? I said, that's not, and I said to myself, that's not what got you here. Grab that spinnerbait and go hit every tree that you can hit until this tournament's over, and whatever happens, happens. And so that's what I did. Picked up the active target, put it down in its holder so I wouldn't touch it again, and then started throwing a spinnerbait. And with 15 minutes left, so the tournament was over at 4:15 or 3:15. With 15 minutes left, I cast it up against this gnarly stump that was out in the middle of this drain and barely bumped it with a blade. And the bait all of a sudden went to the right about 20 inches, just right over to the right. And I'm like, set the hook and holding on and trying to make sure I got a good hook set in him, and got him to the boat and looked at him. And I'm like, this might have done it. I was like, guys, if I didn't tie for the lead, because Matthew Scotch was in the lead when they shut the leaderboard off. He had 102 inches for that day, and it's hard to upgrade from 102 inches.
Yeah,
really hard. But I had a 17 or 18 inch was my smallest one, and I could easily upgrade with a 20 incher. And so that's when I was like, I might have won this thing. I said, I don't know. I being me, I was like, no, I probably just came in second, but I know I came in second. I said, so let's go. And given the outro for my video, so let's go to the weigh-in or go to the award ceremony and see what happens. And of course, I got the text after the tournament was over. Meet us. Everybody in the top 25 or so gets a text that says, "Meet us at the award ceremony." And so that was it, man. I mean, and that last fish, that 20 and a half incher, I think it was a 20.5 incher. It was awesome, dude. It really was.
What was your biggest fish of the tournament?
The 21 and some change that I caught earlier that morning, up super shallow where she wasn't supposed to be. And she was in less than 1.5 feet of water. And she actually made me spend 2 hours covering water that didn't have any fish in it, because she was right there. I'm like, And still to this day, I don't know why she was up that shallow and in that spot, but I evidently made the perfect cast to get her to bite. So.
Well, so you were watching it on, was it, or you knew she was there, or were you
No,
just
I had no clue.
oh, okay.
I was in search mode. The
Oh,
bite had slowed down midway through the morning, and I moved out of that deeper water. I said, let's see if they've pushed up shallow, because that's what they had been doing, is starting the morning off deeper, and then when the sun comes up, they were pushing up shallow and getting tight to cover. And so I said, let me go up shallow. And I went to an area where there was a bass boat the day before, so I never got a chance to really look around that area good. And it was only 50, 100, maybe 100 yards from where I was fishing, so it wasn't far. But I just started fan casting, and I'd catch a little dink and a little dink, and I think I caught a 13-incher before I caught her off the same stump or in the same spot. And so I wasn't expecting anything. Matter of fact, when you watch the video, if it launches either Sunday or Monday or Tuesday of next week, I even said, I got to get out of here. They're not here. And then I made that one cast in that 21-incher bit. So
what does it go through your mindset when you're trying, when you're like, okay, I need one, or I need my upgrades now. Now you're catching fish, you're quality fish, but you need to bump up. I know it changes, whatever bait, whatever technique, whatever decision you make, it's gonna be different in each lake, season, spawning,
right.
pre-spawning, summer, winter, all that. But as far as your mindset goes, what's the first thing that you start thinking when you realize, all right, if I want to move up, I need to leave what's a quality bite to see if I can find a bigger bite? What's that mindset like? Take me through that.
So typically it's if I'm throwing something that's going to get me a limit, and then I'm not one of those tournament guys that go look for a 5-fish limit and then go look for big fish. Because I believe that big fish will bite at the same period of time a smaller limit will bite. So I want to throw a bait that's going to catch me a big fish. And if I catch a small one on it, great. But I want to throw something that's a little bit bigger, or something that I feel in that period of time of the year, depending on everything else, that's going to get me a big bite. So I was throwing a 1/2-ounce spinnerbait with large blades the whole tournament. Literally the whole tournament, except for one fish was on a frog, and that was just a fluke. I saw a fish boil up underneath the matted grass, and I threw a frog up there and drug it to the edge of the grass, and the fish would follow it. It was in such shallow water, it came up and then slurped the frog in, and I set the hook. They did not want to bust water. He literally just sucked it in and swam down. And so topwater wasn't anywhere in my priority. But that one spinnerbait, because it was big bladed, it mimicked a big bait. I knew I could catch quality fish all day long on it. But typically when I do get to that point where I'm like, man, I need to go upgrade, I grab one specific bait, and that's a trick shad, a bull shad trick shad, 7-inch, $160 bait, whatever he sells them for. And I just go throw it the same places I would throw anything else, or throw a jig, but usually that big swim bait, just to get a big bite. And you're only looking for one bite. And that's why I don't, for tournament wise, I try to throw something that's going to get me a big bite no matter what. So
that's really interesting. And I agree with you on that. Like, but I also think, and I'm not a veteran of any tournaments. I do my local and some national trails. I don't know. I've never been in the running for an AOY. I imagine there are times where you might say, especially later in the season, or maybe early in the season, where you might say, all right, I'm not looking to win this. I'm just looking to get AOY points. And maybe at that point you say, like, you know what, let me just make sure I get a limit, and then I'll look for upgrading. But that's more of big picture mentality. Like, AOY runnings, you need to make sure you got a solid just to be in the hunt or stay at the top.
And that would be a decision I wouldn't make until just before the first day of the tournament, depending on how practice went. And practice can tell you a lot of things. I knew that I could catch a 94, 95-inch limit every day on that lake. I knew it. And so I knew that I was going to be able to do that with a bait that was going to catch anything. And if I went into a tournament like a tournament on let's say Lake Lanier that's got all spotted bass, and I'm not catching really good fish during the practice and stuff like that, then I'm like, okay, I've just got to do the best I can do with what I've got, grab a finesse worm or a shaky head or something and go try to catch as many fish I can catch, no matter what their size is. Don't worry about their size, just and do the best you can do. And sometimes you've got to do that no matter what tournament it is. Sometimes you just got to say, okay, I don't know what's going on, or I've got a little bit of something figured out. Let me get a limit doing that one little something, and then let's go figure out something else maybe that I can catch a bigger fish towards the end of the day on. So
that's pretty cool. Questions again, if you have any questions for those that are listening or watching, please put in the comments. Brian Elias says, how did Christine Fisher do? I'm not sure what place she did, but I think she catch a check.
I think she was in the teens. She was there. I think she was, if I remember correctly, I think she was somewhere in the teens. I can't remember exactly what though.
What is this winning this tournament? This is kind of like a two-part question. First of all, what does it mean for you personally? Let me ask that first, and I'll ask the follow-up to that. But for you personally, as far as, your growth as an angler, your own, sense of satisfaction, what does winning this Bassmaster tournament mean for you personally?
That's mainly, I don't do this for clout. I don't do this. I do it to prove to myself what I can do. Because when I first started YouTube years ago, I was fishing out of a 14-foot John boat with an 8-horse tiller, and I was fishing bass tournaments and trying to do the best I can do. And then I started YouTube stuff, and I was just like, I did YouTube instructional videos, so it would force me to learn the techniques so I could fish it, teach it to people, and then so I could also fish them. So, and so with tournaments, I'm kind of the same way. I do this to learn. I do this to test my skills, and I learned so much about fishing drawdown lakes in this tournament. I learned things that I never thought I would, that I've never read before. And just by searching and observation and catching fish and doing this, I learned a lot of stuff. And so that's the biggest thing for me is I want to see how good I am. And it's not about trying to show everybody else how good I am. I just want to see,
I agree. I obviously don't have the biggest following social media as you have, but I personally view it as like personal growth, like what measuring stick only to prove it to myself. Now, you mentioned something about cloud, and like I know, like you mentioned, you're not chasing cloud. However, you do have a social media, and adding this to your, I guess, list of achievements, kind of in my mind, and maybe I'm ignorant in the way I'm thinking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it separates you from other social media influencer to say, I'm not an influencer, or not just an influencer. I'm also good at what I do, and I can go toe to toe with the best of them in any given weekend. As far as your social media growth and what it does for you, because I understand that for you, this is your 9 to 5. This is your job. This is how you provide for your family. So there's the business side of that. What does that winning this mean for the business side of the Flukemaster brand?
I don't know yet. But I do know that a lot of my friends in the industry, John Cruz that owns Missile Baits, that kind of stuff. These friends from Z-Man and all the guys that I've built relationships through over the years. I got a lot of, they were messaging me and they're, giving me congratulations and that kind of stuff. And it's pretty cool because they've all won, won blue trophies too. And, and that blue trophy means a lot to guys that really follow Bassmasters and I love that side of the sport. I love Bassmasters. I love what they've done for kayak fishing and for bass, boating. You guys know that the announcement today was there's no entry fees for Elite Series and Bassmasters Classic anymore, which is amazing. That's awesome. And so they don't have to come out of pocket $5,000 a tournament anymore, which is usually what they had to beg for their from their sponsors. And so, for me, I don't know what it's going to do for that. The biggest thing is, for me is that a lot of my friends in the industry can now see that, hey, I can actually do this, and that's kind of more or less buddies and that kind of stuff. What the rest of the world thinks, it's not something that really concerns me. So
it does shut some people out from certain groups. It shut some haters out. I'm sure there was
and I never pay attention to the haters. I don't even know and care what they have to say. It's my buddies. Those are the ones. That's the ones that I care about what they say.
That is funny. Well, I'll mention this quickly, as I know probably you're not gonna reply to this, but I did mention my buddies at the Nation. I'm like, so is the Flukemaster coming to your show on Monday Live? And they're like, oh, we're gonna try. I'm like, I would pay-per-view that one. that would have been fun to watch you at the Nation talk about your big win.
I would have been on that one, and I didn't explain to Ryan exactly what was going on. Is the period of time where they were doing the show in my travel time, it would have put me in the deadest spot on my whole trip, which was between Lake Weiss and my house, which there's very little cell signal, if at all. And so they would have never even seen me. I'd have been off the grid, for that whole 36, it's a straight line. It's 36 miles, but it's about a 45-minute drive. For that whole 45 minutes, I have no signal at all until I get to my house and hook up to my Wi-Fi.
So, opportunity missed for all of us. That would have totally enjoyed.
Well, they were supposed to have me on this Monday, but they never called me and never let me know. So I didn't. I was too busy to try to chase them down. So.
All right, but hopefully you'll be there, man. You should. I think you I know it's, as far as tournament goes, they're probably the biggest platform that promotes kayak bass fishing, and you're one of the biggest stars in our sport, as proven not just by your social media but your results. So, be that as it may, you definitely earn the respect, I think, from everyone. That was funny. I was gonna going back to the Bassmaster Elite. Now, I've talked to Steve Owens privately about where does he think in the future where we're going to have an elite tournament, where people, kayak bass anglers, actually qualify, same as the bass boating world. I know the challenges are a little different because you can't have a cameraman on your kayak, with you.
Right.
So they have to invest in boats and other. There's some money that needs to be invested, and the question is the audience going to be there? But I know there is a plan in place. Not saying that everything is in place, but I know they're kicking the tires on that. When I heard about the Bassmaster Elite, now I've full disclosure, bass fishing, to me, I compare it to baseball. I love watching I love playing baseball. I don't necessarily watch baseball. Last time I watched was when the Cubs won the World Series, and that's because I grew up in the cable TV generation where WGN would play Cubs games.
You got to see all the Cubs games.
Yeah, so I fell in love with Andre Dawson, Ryan Sandberg, all those guys. So I was overjoyed when they won the World Series. That's probably the last time I watched a baseball game. So I don't really enjoy watching the Bassmaster Elites or any other tournaments. But I love I love bass fishing. I love bass fishing competition. That being said, do you think, with your experience, that decision that there's no entry fees? First of all, before I ask the questions, I want to make a comment on that, because somebody had mentioned, well, the payouts are going to be smaller. I'm like, well, aside from the payouts, yes, they're going to be smaller, but I think it legitimizes the sport. No other major sport that is televised do the athletes have to pay to play. And I'm not talking about NBA or MLB players paying the union fees. That's different. Yeah. I'm talking about having to pay in order to get you're winning your money back.
Well, basically, and we don't know what kind of sponsors they've got lined up yet. There's a lot we don't know, but the simple fact is those guys don't have to come out of pocket to be able to compete anymore.
Exactly.
And it means a lot. So hopefully they're able to keep, instead of begging their sponsors for that money for entry fees, those sponsors are able to drop that money into their pockets, and they're able to make a little bit more money on their job, because that's what they're doing 24/7. Hopefully they'll be able to put that money in their pocket and be able to and live a little bit better. Because you guys, A lot of those guys live out of their RVs. A lot of those guys are on the road all the time. They got, they max out their credit cards every single year in hopes that they win a tournament and be able to pay those credit cards off. I've talked to so many of them, been doing this 20 years at least. And those guys, a lot of them live, credit card to credit card, and it's crazy. And so it's nice to see that. No, it shouldn't be that way.
When it's televised, and now, Gerald Swindle and I forgot the names, Seth, what's his last name for Seth? I forgot. Who's also the one with the long hair? Seth?
Fighter.
Those guys are out there. People tune in to watch them. I don't feel like they should have to pay for people to watch them. It should be the other way around. I think it dignifies the athletes and the anglers fishing that. The fact that, hey, I don't have to pay. I don't have to beg now for sponsors to pay for me. This is what it should be. The anglers are bringing in the viewership. It's kind of like NASCAR where, you got your Dale, used to be, this kind of dating myself here, but the Dale Earnhardt senior, junior, and all those drivers back in the day where people buy their jersey, will buy their jacket and stuff like that. This is where the sport is heading. So I think that change is long overdue. And hopefully, it'll at some point, as kayak bass fishing grows, it'll have a trickle down effect. I honestly think if there's a way to make it feasible financially to actually put cameras on kayak anglers and have live streaming, actually, I think more people will be more interested just because of the challenges of fishing out of a kayak versus
it's not hard anymore. I mean, the reason I'm able to stream everywhere I'm the very first person to ever put Starlink on my kayak.
Yep, I think
I've got a Starlink satellite mounted in the front of my kayak, and it doesn't draw a lot of power. It does have its own individual battery, so I know how much time I've got. But it's pretty simple. It is pretty pricey to start with, but it's great. I mean, for doing what I'm doing, it's not hard to stream using Starlink, no matter where you're at on the lake, because typically trees aren't in the way. If you try to do it in the woods, you can forget it. But yeah, it's pretty neat. So yeah, it can be done.
Yeah. I think it's more aesthetically pleasing.
Yep. The one thing I don't want to see is I don't want to see kayakers followed around by people in bass boats.
Yeah.
And because I can tell you right now, one of the blessings of that second day is the camera boat was trying to find me all day long and could not find me. And had they pulled up in that drain with that boat and as much water as those bass boats displace, it would have shut down most of the fishing in that drain, and I wouldn't have caught the fish that I caught on Sunday, because that was and the same thing with those big bass boats in there on Saturday. They were barely catching any fish, although I knew that there were fish all underneath their boat and all around their boat and everything else. And I was able to get a little bit away from them found an area that hadn't been messed up yet, and I was able to catch all those fish. And so I would love to see, if they're going to have chase boats, they need to be chase kayaks. I don't want to see a bass boat follow me. And I probably would have kicked the camera boat out of the drain if he'd have come in, for sure. So
yeah, no, it's tricky, especially on a lake that's been drawn down like Bistineau.
Oh yeah,
you can get away with it. I don't know.
Concentrated. Yeah. When I guided on that private lake years ago in North Carolina, it had been stocked. It was full of 5-pound bass. It was, they're all feeder trained. I mean, it was a manicured lake is what it was. And I was just a glorified fishing caddy, but we always caught fish, guaranteed to catch fish. But there was one day that I did not, because the water had cooled down. And then just before the day before the guys showed up, or the day the guys showed up, the water warmed up and every fish in that lake moved into this one pocket. And you could not make a cast over their head without the entire pocket exploding with fish. And you would spook every single one of those bass. And I had 2 experienced anglers on my boat, and neither one of them caught a fish the entire day. But it happens in an area like that when a boat moves in and they feel that pressure from the displacement from the boat, it causes them to spook, or it doesn't spook them, and they just shut down.
I My first experience at Caddo actually a couple of years ago was that it was, I mentioned it on the podcast last week, where it forced me to do something that I wasn't really good at, was skipping, because you could see the bass when you, like, even if you flipped or pitched. um by the way, I learned and practiced flipping and pitching watching your videos. I thought it's awesome. I never seen, so flipping is when you just flip it, and pitching is when you hold the
Yeah,
line, right? Or
yeah.
vice versa.
Pitching is two-handed. Flipping is one-handed. Yep.
Yes. So I think that's the only video I've seen that I found that
You know, I had
breaks it down
pneumonia.
as good as that.
When I filmed that video, I had pneumonia. I could barely talk. when
Well,
I made that
I'm
video.
telling you, it made a difference for me. Not maybe on this tournament, but just as far as my growth. But
Yep.
the point that I was trying to make is, like, it was that even flipping or pitching, it would still create enough wake that it would completely disperse the fish. And I
Yep.
remember talking to Ronaldo Nandin about it in practice. I'm like, dude, I don't know why. It's just like, try skipping. And he taught me, it's like, once you learn to skip, what it does, it looks and it feels and it sounds like a fish running away from a predator.
Yep. Yep.
So it actually, instead of like a splash that's gonna scare them, it's actually gonna draw them into wherever
Yep.
the bait lands.
Yep.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because yes, I seen it where it's like, man, just that little, as silent as you can be, still flipping, sometimes it'll cost the fish to disperse. And I've kind of learned a couple of years ago, I learned the value of actually learning how to skip.
Yep.
To me, it was like, oh, this is too complicated. I can just get away with pitching.
The importance of what I did during this tournament is the most important thing was to make sure I made a cast well past the tree for the same reason. Make it well past the tree, and then I'd be drifting one way. I'd make the cast to the tree, and then it would drift to where I could pull the line as I'm reeling. I could pull it up and bump the tree with the bait as it was going by. That was key, because they really you would hardly ever get them to bite unless you hit something, unless you bump the tree or something like that. Or I also found that if you didn't hit it, you could reel 3 or 4 more times past the tree and kill it, and they would follow it down and hit it on the way down, because they would track it in that muddy water. They really couldn't see it, but they could feel it, and they would track it. And the minute you killed it, they would go down and grab it.
That is so cool to learn the intricacies of that and kind of be able to learn that through experience. Simply Fishing just coming a few minutes ago, says, I would like to see Gene do a series of practicing, like how we would break down things down with 3 days on the water. I know you talked about that and we'll mention this, we'll go into this a little bit, but Friday Night Lives, you would get this question a lot about practicing. So do you think, have you done a series of videos like that in practicing that Simply Fishing can go back to?
Not really, because in my mind, it all depends on the body of water, because everything is so much different from body of water. I mean, it's still a bass. A bass is a bass is a bass, but the conditions and stuff like that. So everything that I would do to do it when I teach that would be all very, very general, very broad, and it wouldn't. And so my biggest advice is practice or learn about seasonal patterns, learn about where fish will congregate during certain seasons, and then you've broken it down about 50%, and then you can go out and fish and figure out what moods they're in and what they're doing and that kind of stuff. But I could probably do a video. I just have to, it would be tough to fit it in 20 minutes. It'd have to be an hour and a half, something like that. So
yeah, it's interesting. Pre-fishing can be, it can go so many ways, and it's even cattle. Like it's completely different lake in early fall that it's been in winter for me. Like winter for me was like, all right, skipping into stumps. This one was like punching grass. It was like, two completely different lakes, even though it's the same body of water.
And then those two lakes are totally different than most any other lakes anybody will ever fish. So trying to do one on those lakes, it doesn't matter whether it's a drawdown Bistineau or full Caddo. The fish act different because they go to different places because they're more natural lakes.
Yeah.
You know, those bait fish move shallow. They go and find certain types of grass, and it just gets all. I would confuse everybody.
Yeah.
It would
Yeah,
be bad.
it's that's a good point because we're talking about Texas, which is mostly, you go down south and it's or central, you get a lot of like Lake Travis Highland style
Yeah, a
reservoir.
lot of man-made Highland style
Yeah.
lake. Yep.
And then Caddo is complete. It's a swamp. It's completely
Yeah, it
different.
has a dam, but it's still a shallow swamp, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. On
And it's
Bistineau, the deepest water on Bistineau I found was 7 feet.
that's crazy. And it's
Yeah.
not a small lake either.
No, it's not. But that drain that I was in, I'm guessing probably 5,000 acres of shallow water drains into that drain. And
So let me ask you this, because that was interesting, and I have no idea how to break down
Mhm.
a lake that's being drawn down. So, for example, on Lake Bistineau, when you mentioned like, well, I was looking for the drains, the lake is being drained. First of all, how do you look up the information for those that have no idea? Hey, if the lake is being drained, how do you look up information? Maybe Bistineau or any lake. Is there an app for that? I'm sure there is that'll
There's a
tell you water
website.
level.
I just Google search like I'll do it now. Lake Bistineau water level.
Oh, okay.
And there's a website, and I'm going to pull it up just to tell you what it is. It's called lakesonline.com. But each lake has their own page, their own internet page, and this one's called Bistineau lakesonline.com, and it gives you history and everything else, the lake level history of that lake, and it tells you where it is and what it's doing, and you can, and it's just that's where I go first to look at lake levels and see what the lakes are doing. And I know exactly that. I know on July 29th they started dropping the lake, and they won't stop until it gets down to where it was last year, which is 9 feet low, which is exactly where they are right now. It actually came up yesterday. It came up a half an inch.
So when you see that a lake is being drawn down, and again, it's different. There's like, let's say Lake Dardanelle, which is more of a river than a lake. Bistineau is, like you mentioned, is more natural lake. But for Bistineau specifically, we can go on for days breaking down each lake. But let's talk about Bistineau, which is more of a natural lake. What do you do? What do you look for when you know the lake is being drawn down? Like, what part of the lake do you search for?
So I look for a deep area that's close to a super shallow area. So the reason is because as the lake's dropping, these fish are going to continue to pull out, and they want to stay out in that deeper water for security, because they don't want to get caught up on dry land. They don't want to get caught up in a puddle. And that's also why they only drop it a half an inch a day. If they dropped it really fast, then a lot of those fish would get stuck up super shallow and die. And so they drop it super slow over a couple of months to give the fish a chance to every day move out a little bit deeper. So on Google Earth, I was looking for these places that were somewhat close to a lot of shallow water, and that would cause those fish to come to that spot or come to that area, or so your options on that lake were either drains, which there are a few of those, and they're hard to find. I was lucky enough to find that one, or just run the river, run the deep edges of the water. Still stay shallow where you're fishing, but stay close to that deep edge of the river. And there was a ton of fish along the river. You just had to cover a lot of water to catch them. And they would there's another couple of places that were flats along the river, but if you looked on the other side of them towards the bank, it was actually super shallow water all the way back. It was a pocket of water, of cypress trees that would drain out into that area, and there was no more water up there. It was all green grass, but all the fish that were up there in the summertime were now down in that flat. And so
in general, because again,
yeah,
they're different, but in general, do you favor one style of bait when the lakes are being drawn out? Do you look like, well, they're probably going to be searching after bait fish, or they'll probably be looking for, something like night crawlers, because,
mm-hmm.
whatever the reason is, in general, do you look for certain Do you favor one bait or another?
No, mainly, at least for that tournament, it was I fished a spinnerbait because a finished spinnerbait could be fished faster and more efficiently, and it was mimicking bait fish because when they get concentrated like they were, they eat anything that swims by. So bluegill, shad, and there were a lot of shad in that area the first couple of days of practice. But by the time the tournament came, there weren't hardly any of them. I think they had all moved out even deeper. And I think if the tournament was 2 days later, it would have been a whole different scenario. I would have been even further out, probably on the river channel. You know, those fish probably would have moved completely out of that area. So I just happened to time it right. You know, they were still up there. And so, but I choose a bait depending on how how I want to fish and the cover that's offered to me and stuff like that. Had I been in your situation, I would have been punching too. You know, where I knew the fish were under the grass, I'd be working on getting under the grass.
That's been I've never been so dedicated to one technique in a tournament where I spent like, well, day one was 4 hours, day two was the entire 8 hours punching grass. And I gotta tell you, punching grass, I mean, other than top water, I can't think of a more fun bite than it has its challenges because you can't count on, well, I'm gonna get 5 bites. No, you better get 6 or 7 because a couple of them are gonna come off, even if you do a textbook hook set. Like you can't get frustrated. And if I feel like you have to really commit because you're not gonna be able to, like, you throw a chatterbait, a spinnerbait, a power bait, something that moves, even a Texas rig, you can cover a lot of water. You can do, run and gun and cover a lot of water. But when you're flipping, it's like, all right, you got this acres of grass. It's not realistic to think I'm gonna punch this square feet, 3 or 4 square feet, and then one cast, and then I'm gonna move up. You can't run and gun. You have to break it down like little by little, so you don't get to move a lot. And I feel like you have to commit to it. You have to, if they're there, right? There's sometimes they're not there. There's no sense in sticking to it. But if they're there, it's one of those bites that I feel like once you commit, I feel like it gives you so much confidence because that, all right, I just have to commit to it.
Yep.
And that commitment, I think it can work in your benefit as a building block to understand that there's times where you don't run and gun. You just have to trust your instinct, trust what you're seeing, and just go for it and commit to it.
Yep.
But it's interesting. What has been, let me shift over to your social media. I'll tell you some of my favorite videos that I've seen from you that have really helped me out. Texas rig, that's where I caught my first bass. By the way, I mentioned this the first time you were on the podcast. When I caught my first bass on a pond, I had been fishing for like a month straight and I couldn't catch anything. And I stumbled on your videos, learned how to Texas rig. Never knew what a Texas rig was until I watched the video. Caught the fish, took a picture, emailed to you. You replied, I think that same day or the next day. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome, man. So I really appreciate it. That you do respond. I'm not telling everybody that follows you, please do not think he's gonna respond to you every time. He's a busy man.
I try.
But he tries. But Texas rig was one of my favorite ones. The shaky head one. Have you made several of the shaky heads one? I think it was the first one that you made. One of my favorite ones that has really gotten me a lot of results. You did it with, I think it was with Jordan, and it was I don't even think that had a name. You called it Child's Play. Jordan, I remember call it the Jenko rig.
Yeah. The janky rig.
Janky rig.
It's called the Child's rig or something. And
yeah.
I didn't know what the name of it was. Yeah, that one was fun.
That was fun. In that video, if anything, when the bite is tough, I go back to that Child's Play rig. And 9 out of 10 times, 99 out of 100, I should say, I catch a fish. Not usually, it's not in the in the PB category, but you'll get some quality bites. You'll definitely get bites.
Yeah, you'll catch fish. Yep.
I
think that rig is as good as just a wacky rig, And I hate to throw a wacky rig. I will throw one when I got to, but it's never going to be my first choice. So.
Do you consider yourself a finesse fisherman, a power fisherman, or something in between?
kind of in between now. I used to be a diehard finesse fisherman. You couldn't get a shaky head out of my hand or a drop shot, or, you couldn't get those out of my hand. And now, now that I found jig fishing, and I love to throw crankbaits and everything else, and mainly because I've had to teach it, so to make videos and teach it and gain confidence in it myself. I consider myself a well-rounded enough to be able to catch fish every day I'm on the water.
What's the worst bait or technique that you are willing to throw on tournament if you feel that's going to get your result? What's the
wacky rig?
Wacky rig. Okay.
I would rather watch paint dry than
it's kind of like the same thing, though.
but it is what it is. Sometimes, and I've been beat with Damon Henderson beats me with his stupid wacky rig all the time, and I'm the one that taught him how to fish.
Damon Henderson, I had him on the podcast when he won the KBF Rookie of the Year, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was moved by his story, so I messaged you like, "Hey, I need Damon's." But is he still fishing?
Yep. Yeah, he actually got KBF Angler of the Year this year.
Really? That's awesome.
Yep. So and he'll flat tell you he won most of his stuff on a wacky rig. Dadgummit.
Yeah, when he won, when I was watching the live show when Chad Hoover announced him, and I think at the end of the day, it was a mishap with the numbers. It seemed like 3 people won Rookie of the Year, which was funny. But I enjoyed having Damien on the podcast and him talking about what it meant, learning from you. And I think he went through a really, I don't know if it was like a medical condition.
He got hurt at work.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And couldn't work anymore. And then they weren't going to give him any money for that. And so he got a lawyer and was able to win a lawsuit to be able to at least, make it to where he could survive. I mean, he wasn't making any money, and he was very depressed because that's some guy's a workaholic.
Yeah.
That is absolute. I mean, when he's, no matter where he's fishing a tournament or anything else, he does Grubhub or DoorDash. He does DoorDash. No matter where he's at fishing a tournament, he'll take time out of his day to go do some DoorDash and just to make a little extra money because he just can't sit still.
What I like about
nuts not being able to work, because during that lawsuit, if he would have lost the lawsuit had he gotten a job, doing anything, picking up paper or whatever else, he would have so he couldn't do anything. So he was super depressed when he met me and we started fishing together. So
yeah, he talked about on the podcast in depth about what it meant, your friendship and bass fishing and watching your channel, which is the beautiful part about what you do, is when you're not only teaching people how to fish, but it transcended to actually, in a way, getting people out of a tough situation.
It helps a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yep.
What is
something magical about being on the water? I had an old gentleman that I was guiding one day many years ago, and he told me that. He's like, he stopped, he paused, he looked at me, and he's like, Gene, there is just something magical about being out on the water. And it's true.
There's nothing like it, especially when you're in a little plastic boat where you can get around. Makes it easier. I wanted to ask you before I let you go. I know I've had you for an hour, and I know you're a busy man, so I don't want to keep you too long. So last chance, people. If you have a question, put it on the comment. But what does this mean? Well, how does this rank? I already asked you what it means, but how does this win rank among your accomplishments? Both you've won tournament KBF, you won other tournaments in other organizations. You've accomplished so much in social media. When you put all that together, life aside, because life is more important, but as far as competition and social media content, growth of your content, getting followers, hitting whatever number you feel like that's gratifying, how does this compare to everything else?
It's about the same, because like I said, it's more it's for my own, it's to prove to myself what I can do. I think it's really cool just that I can now call myself a Bassmaster champion. Which is something that never even crossed my mind. I don't want to say that was like a goal or aspiration or anything else. It was just, I'm like, and when I won, I didn't even realize it. But then John Cruz was like, dude, you can call yourself a Bassmaster champion now. I'm like, really? Like, that's cool. And so, but yeah, it's pretty neat. But like I said, it's all internal for me. The wins and everything else, it's all internal.
Lake Fork next year championship. Are you excited?
I am. Every time I have fished Lake Fork, I've broken something because of all the stumps and everything else. And I fished the very first Bassmaster Kayak Series event on Lake Fork, and the last day of practice, at the end of the day, when I was on my way in, I sheared the entire shaft of my Torpedo, and it ruined the entire tournament for me. Of course, it was only a one-day tournament, but I actually had to get a competitor to tow me to my spot on tournament day, which was legal, and I think it still is. I haven't read the rules about that, but tow me to my spot, and I paddled the whole day, and then I had to paddle all the way back to the boat ramp, and I caught 2 fish. So
yeah, I think you mentioned that to me in conversation that we had, that you said Fork is you always break something.
Yeah, I always break. I mean, 20 years ago, when I borrowed my father-in-law's boat to go there, and I broke his trolling motor.
Oh, that's
and then I went there again with my boat, and I broke my trolling motor, and I cracked my boat. And these are trees that are in the boat channel. That's not like I'm outside running hard outside the boat channel. These are trees that are literally in between the marker buoys, and I'm still hitting them. And so, yeah, it's not my favorite lake for navigation. It's a little bit easier with a kayak, but I love that lake. There's still a 14-plus pounder that haunts my dreams that I've tried to catch off the bed for 2 days. I caught the male 3 times, and he was 5.5 pounds, and she made him look like a baby.
It's what's cool about you saying that is I've heard you say this. The one thing that you're guilty of is consistency, because I've heard you say this in your Friday Night Live since I started watching you, that you reference is like that 14-pound bass. And you always use the same word. It still haunts me. So 5 years later, it's still
my entire life. I can tell you exactly where that thing was spawning too. Oh my goodness. And that was, I don't know, that was a Bass Resource road trip. So that was 15, 20 years ago. So
Bass Resource, that's what it is. Bass Resource, that's a channel I think that I first watched you on.
Yeah.
Quick question before I let you go. What's your PB?
10 pounds, 12 ounces. It's a funny story. I had a 7 video deal with Hobie before I signed with Jackson, and then before I signed with Bonafide. Just a little 7 video deal. And I went on a photo shoot with them because they wanted to get pictures of the new PA 14 and get, pictures of fish. And I went to this private lake in Alabama, and Hank Parker was there filming at the same time. It was a small little private lake, and he was sponsored by Hobie at the time as well. And I already knew him from some stuff I was doing somewhere else, and we knew each other and everything else. But he was filming his TV show. He went to the left on this little pond, and so I had to go get some pictures of some fish. So I just went to the right. And I swung around, and there was this big tree laying in the water, and I pitched a crawl bait up underneath or next to the thing, and it started to swim off, and I set the hook. 10, 12, we got beautiful pictures and everything else. That son of a gun didn't talk to me for 2 days. I saw him go by that stump 2 or 3 times trying to catch that fish off of that stump, and he didn't. And finally, as I was getting ready to leave, or shortly before I left, he was like, "Gee, man, that was one heck of a fish. I just want to congratulate you." But I know his gears were grinding a little bit just because TV show and trying to catch big fish on TV shows. I understand that. I just chuckled. I thought it was funny that someone wouldn't talk to me for 2 days.
Quick question. Bonafide XTR. Are you going to switch to it in the near future, or are you going to stick with the PWR? I know you're big with Bonafide, and by the way, Bonafide has been up in their game. It used to be Hobie and Old Town, but I think Bonafide with the new kayaks, they kind of really understood what the trend is, which is like, seems like every 6 months they were debuting a new kayak for a new specific. It didn't feel like, oh yeah, you just change a couple of things that you're calling it new. Like
Well,
no, like the Skip was new, like the RVR was new.
Right.
They're all
And
different kayaks. Yeah.
It's because they listen to us.
Yes.
You know, other companies that I've worked with, they don't listen to the pro staff. Their engineers already know everything that needs to be known about kayak fishing, although their engineers are whitewater fishermen, or whitewater kayakers, you know. And so Bonafide listened. So when I went to Hans Newts 3 years ago and said, dude, we need to be working on a motor kayak because that's where the world's going.
Yep.
I know there's a lot of people that are saying, I hate motors, we'll never go motors, blah, blah. I said, that's where the world's going. We need to be working on it. And that's when the gears started grinding for the PWR, you know, and several of the really good things on the PWR I'm very proud of because they were my ideas. You know, having the steerable rudder and having the sacrificial plates to be able to mount everything to, you know, the $15 if you mess them up and you haven't drilled holes in your kayak. Those were all things that I did back when I used to build electric boats out of old bass trackers. You know, just access plates is all they are. And so, but the PWR is my baby. I love fishing out of that thing. It is such a good, fast boat. You know, I went from the SS. Yeah, I went from the SS to the PWR, and it's a 20% increase in speed, and that's my own experiments. Along with that's exactly what the computer said it was going to do when it was designed. Said you're going to get a 20% increase in whole what do they call it in whole efficiency, and that's exactly what it was, a 20% increase in speed. And so it's fast. The XTR, I think it has a place. Yeah. I just don't know where it is yet. I think in my mind, because I don't have one yet, I'm still waiting on them to tell me when to come pick mine up. I know it's going to be my inshore boat that I go redfish fishing with because it's going to be a sight fishing boat. Other than that, I've got to sit there and stare at it for about 2 or 3 weeks and decide how I'm going to rig it out to figure out what I'm going to. Now, Chad has his, and his first text from me after he got his was, this is not what I thought it was. And then 4 or 5 days into it, he's like, I absolutely love this thing. And that's his personal text to me. Yeah. That's not out to show the whole world. So I'm excited that he likes it now. It makes me want to get one even more and see what I can do with it. But for right now, I've got that PWR so rigged up the way I like to have it rigged up. And it's very, very adjustable depending on how I'm going to fish and stuff like that. I don't see that the XTR being my main boat yet. So
it's interesting, but that's what I appreciate about Bonafide. You know, they don't make the same generic brand and then kind of rebrand it just to keep things trendy, just to keep your name relevant. Like I mentioned, the RVR, it's its own platform and it works great. Probably I don't do a lot of river fishing. I know do great. We would probably throw in Crescent Shoal in there, rightfully so. But the RVR, I think it's one of the, if not the best, one of the best boats for river fishing. The PWR seems to be like that Swiss Army knife where you can go, fish shallow if you need to, or you can go big water if you need to. And then the XTR, I haven't seen it personally. I've seen it in iCast, but I haven't seen it on the water. Yeah. So I'm interested. It seems like it would be like a big. It's a kayak. You can use it for many things, but I think where it shines is something like we were talking about, like a highland reservoir. You can cover a lot of water, very stable. You can stand on it. You can.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I kind of see is that it will be one of those kayaks where you're able to cover a lot of water because it holds a lot of battery, and so you can throw these Newports on there and really cover a lot of water if you've got enough battery to do that and cover it fast. It is a very efficient hull for its size. It paddles very well for its size. Once you get
that's the key word.
just like with the SS 127, once you got it going, it kept going. But it's a big wide, it's a wide boat. It's not, it's still a half an inch narrower than the Titan X.
That's a barge.
It's a different shaped hull. It's a different, different style. So you're able to paddle it a little bit better, and that'll also make it to where when you're running a motor with it, it runs it a lot. You know, you're able to get more distance with the amount of battery that you're using, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty neat. I am gonna put two motors on it. I will put I'll put an XI3 up front, and I'll put a Newport on the back to see, you know, and I'll run it that way as long as it's legal in tournament. And, you know, it's not legal in tournaments. I'll have to pull one of them off. But yeah,
I'm assuming Bonafide is either doing his due diligence to try to influence that, or at least they should be praying about it, because if once they allow dual motors, and I think that's coming, I think the XDR would take. Heck, I would consider doing the XDR if they allow dual motors like that.
Well, it's going to
be sweet. Yeah.
What that's going to depend on is the manufacturers actually building a boat that they can say that this is good for two motors. But that's one of those roadblocks that they're scared to. You know, back in the day, they were scared to build a boat you could stand up on.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way, but this is another one of those barriers where they're like, let's just wait and see. That might end up being more dangerous than we want. You know?
Yeah, I mean, when you invest in something and it comes out like, you know, it's a dud, it doesn't work out. You know, all those. It's not just building; it's the engineering, it's the science behind it, and you're hoping that it'll attract a market. And if it doesn't, then I mean, you literally wasted thousands, tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, in, you know, research, engineering for something that didn't pan out. That's a big hit on a small company that does kayaks.
Yeah. I'm excited about it because I've got one buddy in Augusta that is just a big dude. He raises offensive linemen. His boys all played college, and they're just big family, big dude. And he's always wanted to get on a kayak and go fishing, and never found one that he was comfortable even trying to get on. And I already told him as soon as that one came out, I was like, dude, I got one for you. I finally got one. I feel like I can put you in and you will be comfortable in.
Well, Gene, I've had you for over an hour, and I really appreciate it. I want to be considerate of your time. Before I let you go, you know, if you want to plug in anyone, you plug in companies, people that have helped you.
Tomorrow night, you guys
Friday Night Live, yes.
Live. Yep. We've got a really big announcement that I'm not going to even hint at right now, but it's going to be really, really cool tomorrow night. I'm going to start my Friday Night Lives up again as soon as I get everything together. This is all a new setup. I actually stained all these cabinets today. I'm remodeling my office now that I'm back down here. And so we got a little bit more extra things to do before I get full on live again. And it may not be on Friday night. It may be a different night of the week, but tomorrow night, at 8:00 Eastern, we'll be having Friday Night Live. Me and my business partner, and we're going to announce something pretty cool. And then my TikTok. If you guys are on TikTok, follow me on TikTok, because I'm going to be doing most of my lives from there. And I'm going to be doing a lot of different content from there. And then when I do YouTube lives from my kayak, that'll be the Q&A, mainly the Q&A stuff. So. And I may start doing my Friday Night Lives from my kayak. Who knows?
You know who's not happy about Friday Night Lives coming back?
Who?
My wife. There was a time in our marriage, she's like, you're going to have to make up and decide it's either Gene or me. So I'm not spending Friday nights watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing, is Friday nights were also date nights. So Friday Night Lives, and that's a lot of times that would be why I stopped doing them, is just because I was, I wanted to go do something with my wife. So
yeah, same here. But I used to catch it on later if I couldn't watch it live. So
yeah, for sure.
And I found this after I started the podcast, that your actual Friday Night Lives, you upload them as a podcast. I don't think a lot of people know that. So there you go. And pretty much on every streaming platform, right?
With TikTok, I've got to figure out how to save those lives. I haven't figured that out yet. I know there's a way. I just haven't taught myself how to do it yet. So
do you feel strange calling yourself a TikToker, or?
Nah, because the way I've been able to survive is always pay attention to what the high school kids are doing and do it and be involved in what they're doing, because in 4, 5, 6 years, they're going to be adults and have jobs and be spending money. So
that's the beauty about, little tangent before I let you go. When you talk about, remember MTV had in their TRL, I forgot what it was. It was like when you request a video, they have this guest, Carson, forgot his first name. He used to be very popular, but then it comes to there's a shelf life, like for kids.
Yep.
Like you start nearing 30s, you let go, so they have to bring something in. With YouTube, you don't have to worry about that. Like, you can still be yourself, you can still be relevant.
Yeah.
And following the trend. So anyways, Gene, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, sir.
Congratulations again, man.
Thanks.
And definitely want to take time to tune in tomorrow's to your Friday Night Lights live. So thank you again for coming on the podcast, man. And I'm really happy for you.
Thanks, guys. And everybody take care. Have a great day.
For those out there watching, listening, remember, we're your PFDs. Thank you for joining. And that's it. Have a great night. Peace out.